Okay, so this is the second part of our series. What's the best way to structure SharePoint? Today, we're going to dive into sites, libraries, lists, and what role does Teams play in all of that. So who's this for today? Well, Ben, I'll give that question to you.
Good stuff. Thanks, Rupert. So yeah, I mean, really very much as same as the last webinar. If you're a CIO or COO, if you're IT or digital transformation, so if you're one of those more technical roles, if you are planning a migration to SharePoint, you want to make sure that you sort of do it the right way, and you want to structure SharePoint the right way, or perhaps if you've already gone to SharePoint and you're worried it's getting a bit out of control and it's not really as effective as it could be. So key takeaways for this session are looking at some core principles of how we design SharePoint sites, looking very much at collaboration and filing scenarios that we referred to in our previous webinar. We're going to talk about some best practices for our SharePoint site design, and we're also going to consider that role of Microsoft Teams with SharePoint, because that can confuse people in terms of how that interaction works. Not everyone is aware that there's that overlap.
Yeah, no, it's certainly one which throws up a lot of questions. So today, we're just going to spend 1 minute recapping what we talked about in the last webinar, which is about hubs and sites. And obviously, the outcome of that is you've created some sites. Today, the question we're going to answer is, what do you put in that site? Now, you start using Microsoft's out-of-the-box sites. They can be confusing, and we're going to cover that first. Then we're going to dive into a couple of scenarios. The first one, we're going to think about human resources scenario, typically managing employee contracts, files related to the person like that, much more a filing scenario. And then the second scenario we're going to dive into is what I'm going to call a marketing scenario. So someone in a marketing team may be working with external parties, wanting to create assets. What do you do with those assets? And how do I maybe bring the rest of the business into my creative process? So I think we've got about 5 or 6 slides, really light on slides today, but big on demos. So Ben, that's where we're starting. I'm just going to recap what I picked up last time, what you were sharing from that webinar. So we talked about the 3 kind of content scenarios that we have. It was a publishing scenario, so that's trusted information, often gone through a review process, generally used by, or accessible to the whole organization. So news being the classic, but other examples might be knowledge or company-wide policies. We then have a filing scenario, and this is what we're thinking about today in terms of HR, which is thinking about contracts, employee records, or maybe financial statements. So something created by an individual which they want to keep for future reference. There may well be compliance requirements around that as well. And then the third scenario, the collaboration scenario. So maybe a departmental team coming together to work on things like trackers, active documents, or project teams, or maybe in the delivery of what you do as a business or an organization, your value chain. Now, one of the things that we did highlight last time was that those 2 filing and collaboration can come together and may sit under one roof, and it's not a distinct site for each type of scenario, but often you're going to find sites which cover both scenarios, and that's certainly what you're going to see today. Now, the last point that we talked about was how you group sites together in terms of hubs and the reasons why you do that. Some of the reasons were around branding, but the really big one was around search. So in an intranet hub, I expect to find information which has been approved, trusted, I can rely on. A workspaces hub is places where I can find work in progress. And generally in workspaces hubs, I probably have access to a subset of those sites. I'm not going to have access to everything. And as I touched on earlier, we're going to focus on a couple of those 2 today, which is the marketing and HR sites. Now, Ben, one of the things that you touched on at the technical side was groups to a team site. So, and I think this is where Microsoft Teams comes in as well. So do you just want to put a bit more focus on that for us right now?
Yeah, so what we're going to be talking about today, because we're looking at both those collaboration and filing scenarios, we can see here that when you're working in that way, when we're thinking about what kind of team site we're going to create, it's, do we need a team site with a Microsoft 365 group or one without? So we're going to be creating one with a Microsoft 365 group, and actually, in fact, we'll be connecting that and looking at that relationship between the team site and Microsoft Teams.
Perfect. So Ben, without further ado, I think we should go into our demo site.
Sounds good.
So what have we got here? Right, I'm in my intranet hub.
Perfect. So I think what we're going to do, really, we're not going to spend too much time looking at the intranet itself today, but what we are going to do is jump over into our workspaces hub. So as we talked about before, when you've got multiple hubs and you want to be able to signpost people to them, if you hover over the hubs nav, we're going to jump into that workspaces hub.
Okay.
And that's where we're signposting all the different workspaces that we have. And this is very much a individualized experience. It's relevant to the individual. It's got their relevant content, their favorites, their feed, etc. Now, before we do anything else, we're going to have a look at the sort of out-of-the-box SharePoint team site you create before we go into some pre-made examples that we have. So if you, Rupert, wouldn't mind going and creating a site.
Okay. And team sites, so that's what we're talking about today.
Yep.
Okay.
So I think one of the things I want to highlight here is there's quite a few options in this list here. If you have a little scroll down, so there's quite a few options, but it's by no means an exhaustive list. The way I tend to position this is these are examples of what you could do. I wouldn't really be thinking of them as pre-ready and polished templates for you to use. So realistically, we're going to be starting with the standard team and configuring it how we want it. Once you've got your team sites ready, it's possible to publish them to your organization so they can use them. So I really think of these just as examples. If you see an exact use case, fine, but generally I would say you're going to tailor it to how you want it.
Yeah, I think it's
So
great for when you're trying to demo what Office 365 can do, but actually when it gets to work, yes, I think you showed us before, Ben, that the standard team is a starting point. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So let's just go and use that template quickly. We're going to go and fire that up.
Okay. Out of the box template. Let's call it something so we know what it was. Perfect. Likes that name.
Good stuff. Let's just go and press next. Just a quick point. Generally, and this is a very specific reason, we're always going to choose private. I think public sites are really very, very edge cases when you're going to use those.
Okay. And then we can add our people at this level.
Yep.
Perfect. So today I'm
second.
logged in as Ben, even though my name is Rupert, just to confuse matters.
Good. So we just got a sec. And now we're into our out-of-the-box template. So there's a few things about this. I'm not a big fan of the default out-of-the-box template. I think it's cluttered. I don't think it's particularly useful, and I think it really merges some of those concepts of publishing and collaboration and filing in not particularly intuitive way. So the very first thing that's front and center is you've got this big news web part here. So I think really in a team site, this is a collaborative space. So unless you're perhaps in a large project and you want to communicate out to everyone in that project, or if you're in a really large department in an enterprise organization, I'm not really convinced of the value of the news web part in a team space like this. The other thing is that you have this documents web part that's been sort of shunted off to the right hand side. It's got this big horizontal scroll bar on it. It's not really that effective. And what we're going to see is actually having that documents library web part on the home page can cause some potential user adoption issues or under sort of training issues. So that we're just going to demonstrate that quickly. So Rupert, if you wouldn't mind going and creating a new document.
Sure.
Don't need to do anything else with it. We'll just shut that down and then just maybe refresh the page a second to let it come back. You don't have to refresh a page, but because we're in a webinar, we want it to come through pretty quickly. So if you could right click on that document, please. Now, when we look at our navigation options here, we don't see the full list of options available to us. And notably, we can't see the option to copy or move, for instance. If you could click on the See All link to take us into the actual underlying document library, and then you right click again or use the three dots.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly we have a much bigger list of options. Notably, we've got the move to, we've got the copy to, and we have the version history. So we don't have those in that default document library web part on the home page. So this can be quite confusing. So having your document library web part on your home page actually can make things a little bit more confusing to people. And when you're trying to explain to people the difference between a web part on a page, which is kind of like a window into your document library, as opposed to being in the document library itself, it's just a layer of complexity that they don't really need to know. So we're going to do a little bit of tidy up on this homepage, Rupert.
Okay, I might just borrow this for later, and then I'm going
Yeah.
to come back to our page, and we're going to lose you.
So let's just go and edit our page and just do a little bit tidy up. So first things first, let's delete the news web part. We're a small team.
That's easy. So Ben, just tell me this concept. We've got something called a section here, and we've got, I think these are quick web parts, all right?
Yeah, absolutely. So within any page, we can add sections. If you click on the add section button a minute, you've got the options to create different types of layouts. So you can have 3 columns, 2 columns, etc., etc. And you can organize your page into a series of sections, and then you put web parts into each of those sections. We're going to leave that for the moment. We're going to stick with the default that we have, which is fine for right now. So we've deleted the news web part. The other web part, I'm not massively convinced on the value of the activity web part, really. Again, it's just a bit of noise. So let's just go and get rid of that.
Okay.
And I definitely don't like having the documents library web part on the page. So let's just get rid of that as well. I'm not saying you should never have documents libraries on pages, by the way, but in this collaborative scenario, that's not the right place for it. It's more useful in publishing scenarios.
And I think it's just worth adding, Ben, this bit on the right here is not part of a page. This is to help you build the page, right? The toolbox.
Yeah. I mean, at the time of this webinar, this is relatively new, added by Microsoft. It's meant to be a sort of an additional sort of tool set to make things. Personally, I think it's a bit of noise. Let's just get rid of that too. Yeah, let's give us a bit more space to work in. So we're going to add 2 web parts, please, Rupert. We're going to add the call to action web part.
Okay.
And we're going to add the saved for later web part.
Okay.
Perfect. Maybe let's just go and drag that save for later web part over onto the right-hand side underneath the quick links.
Reshaped. That's quite nice. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then let's just go and update that call to action web part. So what we're going to do is signpost people to their working documents or their documents library from here. That's actually the button label. So maybe just call that click to view, perhaps, Rupert, if you don't mind.
Okay.
There we go. We'll go and update the link, which you grabbed earlier, and then we're just going to call that, working documents.
Perfect. Pop it in the middle.
Good stuff.
And I just press publish.
Yep. Now, clearly there's a bit of work to do on this, and we're going to have a look at a sort of example that we've already put together instead of building this all out on the fly. But what we've done is we've made this a bit more relevant to the user because we have the save for later, which is kind of like a favorites web part. And instead of showing the documents library on a web page where we're going to have some of those inconsistencies of navigation, we're just signposting people to the underlying library. Now, what I might say before we wrap that up, let's just go and look at a completed example. So if you can hover over and look at our HR site, please. So as a sort of final view of that, we can see that we've taken that a bit further, made it a bit more visual. So a couple of things to highlight here. So within HR, actually, we've separated the day-to-day documents from our sort of more formal records. We're going to talk about that in a bit. We've got our save for later, which we've renamed my HR favorites. We've even brought in my recent documents. So the individual has got something that's directly relevant to them. And then we'll talk a little bit more about that HR processes when we go into the HR scenario shortly.
Okay. So Ben, I'm just going to summarize just what you talked about there. So just pop this up there. So use the out-of-the-box site, but the plain one is generally where we're going. And as you see in the bottom corner, we say avoid Microsoft templates. I think it has to be quite a unique use case where that actually adds value. And then start by removing the noise and news component, the activity component we don't tend to use. We talked about the embedded document libraries causing a confusing end user experience because of the nature of the different user interface. And then simplify the navigation as well. So there's some stuff on the left-hand side there, which was removed by Ben. Now, what we're looking to add is personalized components in the context of that site. So what you saw on the HR site, and I'll show you again shortly, is when we had the favorites, we just filtered it to the favorites within that HR site. And then Ben at the end just showed me there how to create a clear call to action to look, this is where you go and get your work done. So that's how we start with our sites. Now we're going to dive in, Ben, to our scenarios. So I'm going to start that with a HR scenario. Kind of things I want to do as an HR person is probably start an employee contract. Maybe if I've got someone joining, I want to get their, permission to work, or maybe a copy of their academic certificates. I might want to go and review and find a contract across all of the information that we hold, or find letters. There's different scenarios. We're going to run through that. And HR very process based, so I might want to understand best practice. So how do I do a certain kind of thing? So these are scenarios I think we're going to cover. So should I flip back to our demo site, Ben?
Yep, sounds good. We're in our HR site already.
That's quick. Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Good. So let's take a look at that. I think the first thing we highlighted is that we kind of separated out our sort of more formal employee related documents from our day-to-day working documents like our trackers. Maybe let's just have a look at our working documents a second, Rupert, if you don't mind. So within here, this is more of our kind of day-to-day. Maybe we're working on a project for benefits. Maybe we've got this sort of team tracker, maybe some of our tracker spreadsheets. We can even see that there's option that says in channel. So maybe if you just expand on that a minute.
Sure.
So we can see there's a couple of additional options here. There's disciplinaries and payrolls with some different icons. Now, the key thing that we're really highlighting is that this space that we're looking at now, this working collaborative area, is actually the thing that's connected to Microsoft Teams, which we're going to look at a little bit more when we start talking about marketing. So this interaction between a team site and Microsoft Teams, we're starting to see some of that already. Now, for something like employee records, that's a bit more formal and structured. So we've separated that into a completely separate employee records library. Perfect. So let's jump into that, Rupert, if that's okay. So what we're going to do now, sorry, quick point. Looking on the screen here, we can see this concept called document sets. A document set, one of my favorite features of SharePoint, is kind of like it's a folder that you can add additional metadata to. So we can have this set of documents related to an individual and a standard folder structure for that individual, but we can see from the status where they are in their journey of employment. We can see what their start date, their finish date, their job title. So we can capture some simple metadata to make it easy to perhaps filter out those employees that are currently employed versus those that perhaps are leaving the business. We can see that quite easily. Now, we're going to create a new folder for a new person. So if you could go new, please, Rupert.
Yep. There we go. Okay.
Okay.
P.
So let's maybe change that status a second as well when you get a chance.
Okay, so she's not started yet, so we're definitely in the pre-employment phase, and we've got
Perfect.
starting
Yes.
next week.
Marvelous.
The head of AI.
Definitely need one of those.
Perfect. Right.
Good stuff.
So she's in there straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing that's just worth highlighting here is maybe if you just jump into the Rupert folder a second. With these kind of folders, we generally are still going to want a standard folder structure to be created. This might be the same for a project. Anytime a new project is created, it's got a standard folder structure. An employee might have a standard set of folders. We're quite pragmatic at Information EXP. We're not the kind of organization that's going to say you should never use folders. There is a place for folders, and we use folders and metadata in balance to get the best of both worlds. Okay, so we've got this folder structure, and actually what we want is anytime a new document set is created, it's going to bring that in. So Rupert, do you mind just switching back up to the employee records that I've written and then jumping over to our form templates or folder templates?
Okay.
So we've created a separate space that's got all of that folder structure. So anytime a new document set's created, it's going to bring it over, and we could add easily additional folders if we want, or we could even add sort of pre-populated content that's going to get added every time.
Okay, so I'm guessing that's Power Automate behind the scenes making that happen.
Exactly. So let's just jump back into our employee records library. If we click into the ClareP folder, so we can see that folder structure has now been set up for us automatically. But this is quite easy. If someone needs to add new folders, they can do that, maintain it themselves.
Okay, so it's not something like a request to IT saying, I now need a new folder for ... They can update the template themselves, and then any future employees will have that template.
Yeah, and we're just using
like
some
that.
simple Power Automate to do that.
Good stuff.
So we're going to create a contract. So we're going to go into the employment folder there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could go new, please. We have pre-uploaded a template for employment contracts to make it a bit easier for us. Now, I'm not going to talk about things like smart templates, which is one of the SharePoint premium features. We're just taking a slightly more old-fashioned approach here of having some placeholders for us to go and update, which is more than enough in a lot of cases. So maybe just give that a name.
Okay, let's call it contract. And that's it.
Good stuff. So let's just jump back. So a couple of things to note. First thing is the status column has inherited from the status of the document set. So one really great feature of document sets is you can set metadata on the set itself, and all documents that sit within it will automatically inherit that metadata. The other thing is that the document type that we've set up called contract has also been populated. And the way that's happened is that we've baked that metadata value into the template. So the user hasn't had to worry about changing any metadata just to create a contract. They can create it from a template, start doing the work, and it's automatically been tagged. Okay.
Perfect.
And we'll see why that's going to be beneficial to us in a little bit, but we've just got one other thing to show you before that.
And I think then what I could do at this point is then send this via Adobe Sign, DocuSign out to the client, and they wouldn't have access to this area. Is that right?
That is exactly it. Yeah. And that's
Okay.
another day. So the next thing that we often do in a HR scenario is we need to gather information from that person as they're joining the organization. So it could be things like passport identification, maybe it's some Microsoft certificates that we need them to sort of evidence that they've got a certain skill set. So typically that might have historically come in via email. We want a better, more secure way of doing that. So if you can go up a level, please.
Okay.
What we're going to do is select the personal information folder. No, not that one. Yeah, that's it. And we're going to choose to request files.
Okay.
So let's just give some simple instructions of what we're asking.
And press
Yeah,
next.
perfect. Yeah. Now we could email them directly and they'll go and receive an email, or we could copy that link and paste it in an email with some more instructions. For the purpose of this demo, we're just going to copy it, and maybe Rupert, if you could jump into, say, a guest browser.
Okay, so guest browser, open a new
so
tab.
we can go and have a look at what that looks like. So this is the experience that the user is going to see when they click into this. They can see that you're requesting to send some information. They can see those instructions. And if you select those files.
Okay, I've got some certificates here.
Okay, let's go and grab those. We can do both of those.
So that's slide 2, and we'll have slide 1. And my name is
Okay.
Claire. Now, Ben, what I liked about this is I don't get to see any of the SharePoint stuff. It's a very simple interface, and I don't need to log in. So you really removed all those barriers which people normally struggle with when they're looking to capture files from other people.
Yeah, I really like this feature. And I think the analogy that I've heard before is it's sort of like we're not giving someone access to the house, we're just allowing them to post through the letterbox. So it's a really nice way of getting stuff in without them seeing what else is going on. We have to worry about all of that security. So let's go into the personal information subfolder there. So we can see that those documents have been uploaded. They've been prefixed by the name of the individual. They've still automatically been tagged with their status because of the document set. But in this case, we do want to set their document type. We should do, because obviously they didn't get created from a template. So yeah, we're going to edit in grid view and just quickly tag those up.
Okay, so that's my certificate. That's another certificate.
Yeah, perfect. So let's just exit. So we've created our contract. We've requested some files from the user. Now let's say that I'm in HR and I want a snapshot of all of the contracts for all of our employees. Let's go back to the root of that employee records folder.
Okay.
So if I wanted to do that, yes, I could search. That's an option. I don't really want to have to go and navigate through every single folder and subfolder to get that. That would be annoying. But what I can do is create a view that shows me just contracts. So if we just switch over that view to current employee contracts, we can now see all of the individual contract documents regardless of what folder they're in. So effectively the folder structure has been flattened. So this is really useful. If you want to just pick out that one or two types of documents without having to navigate across everything, you almost want a bird's eye view of some specific things as opposed to a deep dive view of an individual. Using these views that flatten the folder structure and then filter by a particular type is really powerful. And actually what we've done is filter based on the start and finish date, so we can see those documents for current employees only. Now, let's say that we had another type of document. Let's say there was letters. We wanted to see all letters. How could we do that? So we're going to show you how to build one of those views now.
Cool.
So Rupert, could you maybe switch back to the all documents view first, please?
Sure.
So the way we're going to do this, first of all, we're going to save this documents view as something else called letters. Perfect.
Got you.
Next thing we're going to do is we're going to flatten the folder structure. So to do that, if you click on the letters drop down, click edit current view. We see this quite old experience. This has been around for quite a long time, 2013, I think. If you ever scroll down, we'll see hidden near the bottom is an option that says folders. So now if you switch that from show items inside folders to show all items without folders and press OK, we're now going to see, maybe just switch back to the letters view. There we go. We're now going to see all of the documents regardless of the folder structure. So there's quite a lot going on, even the document sets. So now that we've flattened that folder structure, we're now going to filter by letters. So if you click on the document type, click on filter by, select the letter, press apply. Final step is just to save that view.
Yeah, so we've got asterisks there saying it's not saved yet. So I know it always says save as, it will just overwrite the existing view there. That's what I've learned from experience.
Now, if you're familiar with that edit current view experience, you can do all of that within that more complicated view, but there's a lot going on there. But in terms of those simple things, this actually gets you, this is a nice, easy way of doing it.
Perfect.
Great. So we've created some views. We've got our letters. We can see our letters. We've got our contracts. We could do that for other types. I think probably the final thing is just have a look at the, this concept of understanding knowledge within the context of our HR team. So what we've done on that right-hand side there is we've used a sort of custom formatting concept to basically expand and show our pages. So maybe if we expand one of those pages, Rupert, and we'll go and click on one of those. Okay, and then we've effectively got all of our page content in here organized around, this particular context. And then if you scroll down again, our little widget on the right-hand side there is showing all of the other pages that we can go to. So what we've basically done here is create some pages in the pages library of our SharePoint site. And again, similar to what I showed you before, we've created a view to drive our sort of page level navigation here that will update itself. Now, the nice thing about this, and we're going to, we're not going to take credit for this actually, this is something that was posted in the SharePoint community. And the concept is using JSON formatting to create your own views. And we can see we've put in a link to the particular person who's come up with this idea, and there's lots of other ideas that you could go and explore if you wanted to look up custom JSON formatting for your lists and libraries.
I think, yeah, it's a slight side point here. There's a huge community of people in the sort of SharePoint space who create added value things for, no cost. So you can do things which maybe SharePoint didn't do out the box, but can do for you now. Probably one of the most famous ones is the search experience that we use on our Policy Express product, which gives that different kind of filtered search. So there's lots of stuff out there to enhance SharePoint. Now, Ben, I think that probably brings us to and then for the HR person, we've gone through that process. There was certainly a few takeaways that I took. we talked about document sets using for that metadata to be applied to all documents within that folder or that folder type. You showed us how to create template folder structures, and then we could replicate that using Power Automate. And then the next one up there, we talked about if you put the metadata within the template, then you're saving the person who's creating that document one extra job, and you're probably going to have better quality data. One of the things that we didn't touch on, Ben, is default metadata in folders. You just wouldn't mind touching on that for us?
Yeah, so we didn't really have time to go into the details of how to do this, but within our employee folder structure, it's possible to create your folder structure and then assign default values onto those individual folders. So let's say, for instance, you had a folder that just had contracts in it, then anytime a new document was uploaded to it, it would get that contract. So that concept is within our document library settings, and it's called column default value settings. And it means that you can create your folder structure and assign default values at different elements or different nodes of the folder structure.
Perfect. And then you talked about the letterbox principle of how you get information from people without them having access to your environment, in terms of, they can't see what's going on, they can drop things through the letterbox. I love that analogy. And then we talked about working docs versus filing docs. So we're going to go in more into that now. We dive into the marketing side. So I've set myself up there. Change of role in marketing. We talk about ideas for marketing, and those ideas actually might come from outside of marketing. So we're certainly going to cover that. I might want to get involved in a campaign. I want to work with content within a library. So that could be PowerPoints, images, those kind of things. A lot in marketing, there's a lot of support often from people outside the organization who might collaborate with you on projects. And I know there's a whole host of ways of doing that, Ben, and you're going to show us what you think is probably the most practical way and secure way of doing that. So I think that's really interesting. And then there may be assets that you create as a marketing person which need to be then published to the organization you work for. So how do we publish those to the internet and get those eyeballs on those? So let's go into all of this, Ben. Shall I bring back up the demo environment?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. So we don't need that one. We need this one. So I might just go back to our home.
To the internet itself, yeah.
Right. Marketing campaigns. I'm seeing a nice call out on the top right here.
Yeah, so one of the first things that we need to do within marketing one of the many things that we might do in marketing is actually gather ideas for things like content from the rest of our organization. So what we've done is that we've created this link on the homepage where people can submit ideas. We get notified of them within marketing, and we can then work on them and action those ideas. So as Rupert's done, he's clicked on that submit an idea call to action, and this has popped up a form powered by Microsoft Lists. We can paste some content in, we can change the format, we can give it a description, what we would suggest. Okay.
And let's submit that.
When we're good, we're going to go and submit it.
Perfect. Right, so I'm going to shut that down.
Perfect. So if I'm in marketing, then how do I get notified? How do I go and access that? So let's just jump into our marketing space. And again, I think before I go into the details of that, we've modified our default marketing site here to make it more relevant to what we're doing. We're going to be talking about some Microsoft lists. And because we've got a few libraries and a few lists, we've actually adapted our navigation slightly to simplify out and then just break down what the lists and the libraries are. We're going to go into the content ideas list.
Okay.
Okay. Again, we've just modified our default views so that we can quite easily see the new items that have come in and the ones that we're working on. So if you could just expand out the proposed view there, we can see that AI for Dummies idea has just come through. That's just come through a minute ago. And we could consider that. We've got a few other options. We can think about the ones that we want to work on. And then when we're ready to start working on it, we're going to drag that into the approved column, into the approved group. Oh, just try that again, Rupert. Yeah, drag that. And that's going to go and update the status to approved.
Lots of AI for Dummies. Perfect.
Got a couple of those. That's fine.
Okay,
so,
and that was just want to stop you there. So how do we get the data into this list here?
Yeah, so I mean, we could do a whole webinar on lists, but let's assume we've got our list set up how we want it, but we want to get some information from the rest of our organization into it. So one of the new features, or relatively new features, that's come into Microsoft Lists is the ability to create forms that you can publish to the rest of your intranet. So if you click on forms, we can see that that form is already there. Let's just go and create a brand new one, Rupert, I think, so we can demonstrate how that works. So let's just give it a title.
Okay.
We can see all of the fields that have been added in by default. Now, the reality is the end users don't need to see all of those fields. They only need to see a subset. So let's just remove off the things that we don't need. I suggest we keep description and format and title. Status has been defaulted, so they don't even need to fill that in.
Okay, so that's interesting. It was prompting us, do we want to remove a required field? But as you say, it's got a default option of proposed, and we don't want people to putting it straight to approve, do we? So that makes sense. Okay.
Good. So we've simplified out our form, and when we're ready to go, let's just click on the Send Form button and copy link.
Okay, so let's go and see what that looks like. I'll just pop it here. And here we go. Now, Ben, what's interesting about this is you don't need access to the underlying site to feed information into that list, do you?
No. So the way that that form has been created is that users in the organization will be able to see it, they'll be able to contribute to it, but they won't see the underlying data.
But there obviously is a key thing here, which is your identity is shared. So this is not the answer if you're collecting, anonymous feedback, but for other kinds of, maybe IT support tickets or tickets within a team, this really could be the answer for you. So that's an interesting side note. I am just going to come back into marketing here. The other thing, Ben, is obviously if these are coming in here, I as a marketing employee might not be checking this every day. Is there a way I can get notified when something drops into this list?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's quite a nice, easy feature. You can create rules for notifications. So if you click on the Automate button,
Okay.
yeah, we can see rules. We're going to go and create a rule. There's a couple of options there. We're interested in the a new item is created. We can go and enter an email address.
And then I can click create, and often that will go and do magic things in AI and Power Automate. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I won't do that now, but it's good to know that I can do that. We'll keep moving forward. So I've submitted an idea. The next thing I want to do, Ben, is I want to get involved in the campaign.
Yeah, so really this is the point that we're going to start thinking of that handoff to Microsoft Teams. So what I might suggest, Rupert, before we do anything else, can you expand out the documents links and go into our working documents?
Okay.
So as before, this is the space that's connected to Microsoft Teams and our Microsoft Teams channels. Now, realistically, I think this is the point to switch over to Teams now. But if we take a quick note of those, we can see those 5 folders, budgets, campaigns, etc. If you click into the Teams tab that you've got open, that you've set up already,
Yep.
we can see that those 5 folders directly correlate with the 5 channels that we've got within our Microsoft Teams space.
Got you.
So what we're going to do is we're going to start collaborating on this content, and we've got a channel around our autumn-winter marketing campaign.
Okay.
So if we go into our Files tab a minute, we've got some folders set up already, and we're going to start working on them.
Well, it's all about AI today, isn't it? So let's do AI. As it happens, I haven't got any content yet, Ben.
Well, that's fine. So I think we're not going to go through all the ins and outs of collaborating and writing documents in Teams, but maybe if you've got some default content that you can upload, let's just go with that for the moment.
Okay, so I've got an image here, which I'm going to use, and I've got a blog post here as well.
All right, fantastic. Now, because really the power of Teams is that ability to collaborate, but also raise conversations and raise awareness and discuss documents, what we're going to do is post one of those documents into our Teams channel and notify our team so that we can start working on it. So if you could click on the Post tab, please.
We'll create a new post.
You don't have to add a subject. This behavior has changed fairly recently, and some people find this add a subject a bit confusing. It's not a requirement. You can just start and mention your team.
Okay, so and I mentioned the team. So although it's prompting me to people, and I could, if I start with them, we've got a better start here. Right, there we go. My team marketing. Have a look at this.
Now we're going to go and link to that document that we've uploaded. So if you click on the add button, press attach file. Now, this is looking at your recent files. So we've only just uploaded it, so it's not going to come through. So if we just click on browse teams and channels, go into the folder.
Let's pop these in.
Perfect. Perfect. So we will notify the rest of our team. People can reply to that. We can have conversations about it. We could even tie it into something like Microsoft Planner for some task management, et cetera, et cetera. As I said, we're not going to go into the ins and outs of co-authoring and collaboration on documents individually. But what we're going to say is once we've reached a point on that document, we're ready for it, we're going to move it into our more formal published space.
Okay.
So let's say we've gone through that collaboration. So Rupert, would you mind jumping into the content library a minute, please?
And where will I find that then?
It's just a little tab just above where you are. We've added this new tab.
Lovely.
Perfect. So just again, what we've highlighted, similar to the employee records concept, we've got our day-to-day working files, and then we've got our slightly more organized, structured files, which are organized in a way that we can easily find them at a later date. We're using document sets again. We've created some keywords to make that content easier to find. And actually, maybe Rupert, if you jump over into the marketing tab that you had open at the top there, that one.
Yep.
And if you just expand out the documents links again and click into our content library, so we can see this is our separate content library, and we've just mapped that through as a new tab into our Microsoft team.
Okay.
So let's just jump back to Teams. And we're going to go into our files area, and we're just going to go through that process of moving it into the right space.
Okay, so as common with many pieces of work, you do a lot of work in progress, but very few assets come out of it, and they're the good bits. So we're going to keep the good bits, and we're going to this reference piece of document. We don't really need that anymore, so I'm going to leave that behind, Ben.
Yeah, so we're just keeping the stuff that we're going to refer to at a later date. So if you go and select that, we're going to go move to.
Okay.
And let's just jump back to documents, switch over to the content library using the little library switcher above. That's it. Content library, go into our AI blog and just drop it in there.
Perfect.
So when we move this document, any editing, any versioning that we've done will come through. So we'll be able to see that history of versions as we were working on things.
Okay, so I get that. We've got a working space. We've got a place where we want to keep our assets. They don't have a lot of value to the rest of the business, so we're going to just keep them in our marketing area. Now, Ben, if I want to bring someone else to help me with this, what's the right way to go about that?
Yeah, so let's take a scenario. Let's take a scenario where we may be working on a graphic design project or a branding refresh, for instance. We've already set up a project for that, so let's just go into there. So typically in marketing, I might be working with some external design agencies, and a common way that we might want to have considered doing this is adding guest users into teams. Now, the problem with that is that those guest users are going to be added to the whole team. So they will see everything.
So not just this channel, but they'd see all of these as well, would they, Ben?
Absolutely, they'll have access to everything. So really, you're then talking about creating separate teams, and maybe that works if you've got a design agency you work with all the time. But when you're realistically just transferring some files back and forth and doing a bit of editing, you don't need that full collaborative experience with them. Actually, just simply sharing a folder within your existing team is more than sufficient. So if you select that, yeah, that's perfect. And we're going to click on the share button, and we can just share the folder without accessing the whole team. If you click on the cog a minute, please, Rupert. It's worth noting the settings that we're going to do. So realistically, when we're sharing externally, we're either using the anyone link or we're using the people you choose link. Yeah, so in that case, you can share with an external email address, even something like a Gmail account, for instance, or Outlook.com account. We're going to stick with anyone links at the moment. Now, you can do things like expiration dates. We're not too worried about that in this scenario. Again, you could email a user. We're just going to copy a link and show you what that experience looks like.
So I've got that, and I'm just going to pop it into my browser here. Now, this is a guest user, as you can see here by the profile. I haven't got any login here, and I'm in here, shared by designer. I've got my file.
Yeah, so what they're effectively seeing is a SharePoint experience as opposed to Teams experience, but that is more than enough for them to be able to upload some files. They'll be able to collaborate with you and do what they need to do. And we can even do things like hide out elements of the navigation so they don't see that stuff. Now, if you click up a level, what you'll notice is whilst in Teams we had access to these additional 3 folders, the designer has only got access to that 1 folder that they've been shared. They're not going to be able to see anything else.
Okay, so that's shared with designer, and here we've got branding and values, and obviously we haven't given access to those, so they're not going to see this. And then with that folder, they can add, edit, and work with us and collaborate and use all the features like co-authoring that we have access to as as someone within the organization. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well that's really helpful because I think a lot of people dive into sharing Teams straight away without thinking, actually, is there a better way of doing this? And I think that was really interesting. So last piece on this is, how do I create, well, I've got this asset completed with help from my designer. How do I get it onto my intranet? Because it's something I want everyone to see.
Yeah, so we may have gone through a few drafting edits, created lots of versions in here. We want to go and publish this content to our intranet now. So let's just go into that folder that we had where we had that document uploaded.
Yeah.
So this time around, we're going to copy this file. So if you just select it, right click.
Okay.
So we're going to copy this to our intranet. And what we've done is we've pre-set up a quick access link to the knowledge section of our intranet, and we pre-created a folder for us to publish that to. And we're going to go and add that onto our intranet in a minute. Now, go on. Sorry, Rupert, you're about to say something.
No, I've gone ahead and pressed some buttons and I've started copying. Oh, it's copying.
Okay. So one of the things I just want to highlight again, what is the difference? Why do we use a copy in this scenario versus a move? So the thing with copying is it doesn't copy the version history, whereas moving does. When we were moving our content into our content library so that we could access ourselves, that is a filing scenario. It's fine for us to be able to see all of that historical versions. What we're doing now is we're publishing this document to the rest of the organization. And when we're publishing, we don't want them to see all of our edits and drafts on the document. We just want them to see the published version at that last point. So in that scenario, we copied it to make it available to them.
Got you.
So final thing then, just to wrap up, we're sort of coming towards the end. So what we need to do now is take that document that we've published to the intranet and embed it within our intranet page. So let's just go to our intranet tab that we've already got open. And we're going to hover over the knowledge section, and we've created under our resources a brand guidelines page. So we want to bring that PowerPoint deck through onto that page. So if you just click and edit this, we're going to use the file and media web part, which is a really nice way of displaying things like PowerPoint decks. If you click on add file, you'll see within our recent documents, that document that we've literally just gone and published, and we've copied it over. We can insert that.
Now, Ben, is that taking a copy of the file again, or is it referencing the one we've just moved?
So it's just referencing the file. So we did the copy. We copied it to the knowledge repository, which is behind the scenes within the intranet area here. And now we're displaying that on our knowledge page.
Perfect. Okay, that's great. Now, this is a new piece of knowledge. I'm worried not everybody might see it off the bat, Ben. Is there a way I can get this out and about?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can then promote it. So if you click on the promote button, we could go and post this as a news story. That's probably the easiest thing. You can even send it to email so people receive it in their inbox.
Okay, that is good. I think that was super helpful, and then I think given a bit of time, that news will then bubble up onto the front page here. What I'm going to do, Ben, is just summarize that last bit which we've had. So things I picked up from that was that smart way of collecting information to put into Microsoft lists where we don't need to give someone access to the underlying list, a bit like the letterbox concept that you talked about in the first half of the webinar. How you separate areas for work in progress versus filing content, I thought that was really helpful. And then you talked about, well, if you're working on a project, at the end of that project, our autumn, winter, there's going to be assets and there's going to be what we might call noise. So we take the assets, take a copy of those, and we put those in our filing area, and then we can then start to archive the channels and put those back to bed. Now, we also talked about how do we bring external people in. And so you showed how to use a folder rather than a team. And so we're not inviting someone straight into a team, but you're inviting them into that folder. And then the last piece that you mentioned was when we publish, we copy because we don't want all the version history. So that sounded helpful too. So very useful. Just to summarize what you've seen today, today was focused on files and collaboration rather than the comms side of SharePoint. Key takeaways for yourselves are use the default site, but then go and remove the noise and create what you really need. Link into the working documents area in your filing area rather than embed them into the page. That way you're going to get consistent user end user navigation. It's going to help you with your training and rollout program and hopefully reduce some confusion. We talked about how you can bring teams for collaboration and different ways of doing that, but not necessarily have to give everyone all the Teams features when you're maybe working with our designer scenario. And then that comms side come back for publishing. So really interesting dive into sites. Can be very complicated. You've got to do an awful lot with them. If you would like more help or like to explore this a bit further with us, do book a call with me. If you click book a discovery call on our website, that will link into my diary and we can have a chat about how we can help with SharePoint. As always, thank you for your insight and expertise. Good session.
Thanks a lot. Cheers, Rupert.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.